Welcome to Knit One, Write Two, where we talk about books and yarn.
Hi, I'm Lynn.
Hi, I'm Vanessa. Before we get started, please remember to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you'll know when our next episode is available.
Today we're going to start by talking about knitting and specifically different kinds of ribbing. And so Vanessa, why don't you tell us what are your favorite kinds of ribbing?
I am a traditionalist, I guess. I really like 1x1 rib. I prefer it 2x2 because I feel like it's a little bit more, I feel like it's a little more orderly looking, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't knit a lot of cables, which use 2x2 a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I have recently knit some projects with mock cables, which are really fun.
What are mock
And
cables?
so mock cables are a ribbing pattern where you twist just the knit stitches and not the purl stitches.
Okay.
So it's not like a cable where you have two sets of knit stitches crossing over each other with
Okay.
purl in between, but
Uh-huh.
more like you just twist the knit stitches so that you have like
It just
it
looks
looks
like
like
a
a
cable.
cable. Yeah, it looks
Okay.
like a cable, but it's not a cable.
I think I
And
actually might
actually,
know what you mean because I think I've probably done that before. I just don't really
yeah,
remember it. Yeah.
yeah. Out the sweater, which
Hmm.
gives it kind of a different, it stretches a little differently than regular ribbing, and a very, it has a very neat and even um, a look to it, which I really like.
Hmm.
And I like that it's a little bit tighter. It's a little bit tighter than regular ribbing,
Hmm.
and it kind of gives it a little more structure, I think, which is really nice in things like raglan seams and necklines and hems and
Hmm.
stuff like that. So
Yeah, that's true. I do like the twisted rib. Uh, I tend to like the the knit to purl to rib. Um, because why do I like that more? Oh, I think for things like cuffs or specifically sock cuffs, I like the
ooh,
knit to
yeah.
purl to. Um, just because I don't know, it feels more chunky and more like cozy.
And it's a
And
little stretchier too, I
it's a
think.
little stretchier, which is helpful when you need to get socks over your heel and like up your leg and stuff like that. So I
Definitely.
do prefer that. And I also really like fisherman's rib, which we've talked about how fisherman's rib is really similar to brioche, but I've definitely
Yes.
knit a bunch of scarves that are just fisherman's rib. I like how it's like it has like depth to
Fluffy.
it and it's like very
Yeah.
fluffy and like squishy almost.
It's very cozy. And
It's
brioche, of
very
course, is the
cozy.
same way because I think it was Interweave Knits that said they are more like fraternal twins than cousins.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
they're very similar. I think the main difference is not so much in the way it looks, but in the way the stitches are worked.
Mm-hmm.
I have not knit fisherman's rib. I have knit brioche. Um, and I find that brioche is really like fisherman's rib. It's really fluffy.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, I think that's where it gets its name from, is because it's airy like the bread. Um, I
Oh, that
think
makes
I could
sense.
be making that up, but that's where I always assumed it got its name from. Um, but I like that they have so much texture and they're visually interesting.
Uh-huh.
Um,
I
but
like that.
also they're the
Sorry, go ahead.
no, but they're the kind of thing that you could just knit mindlessly too, because it's very it's very rhythmic and you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I like the in fisherman's rib, you get this like little elongated V,
Yeah.
which is not like when you like slip a knit, you get the elongated V, but with fisherman's rib, you actually knit into the stitch below.
Right.
And so you get this, it's not just elongated, but the whole V looks bigger. And for some reason, I really like that look.
Yeah. It's
Yeah,
it's
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 nice.
visually interesting,
Hmm.
and it's more than just, we use ribbing to like make a flat edge a lot of the time so that your
Right.
knitting won't curl. Like if you
Yeah.
take a t-shirt and you cut it how it curls, well, your
Hmm.
knitting will do the same thing if there's no edge to it. So that's why we use ribbing. But when the ribbing can also be interesting visually,
Hmm.
I think that's really cool. And
Hmm.
I love that
Yeah.
about Fisherman's Rib and Brioche, is that they're interesting enough on their own that you could do like a whole project in it, and um, it doesn't look too basic, I guess.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Is brioche the one where if you use two colors, you can get one side is all one color and the other side is all a separate color?
um, that's, I think, double knitting,
Oh, okay.
but Brioche will give you like vertical stripes of the two colors. And I don't know if you could do it so it
Uh,
looks like, I don't know if you could do it the other way. So it looks like double knitting. But with double knitting, you get um, like the one side is a reverse of the other. So
right.
you would have like if one side was, say, like all, say, green and pink prep
Hmm.
colors. So if one side was green and the other side was pink and you did any color work, the pink on green, like if the background was green for one, the background would be pink for the other, and then the
Hmm.
design would swap.
Right, right,
Um,
right. Yeah.
so yeah.
So one thing I love about knitting and cables, because we were talking about cables, is how you can get the cables to like grow out of the ribbing.
Yes,
I always love it
I
when
love that.
patterns do that. And I think most patterns do that these days, but I'm always like, ooh, that looks so cool.
Yes. One of my first knitting projects ever, because I didn't know anything, didn't know I wasn't supposed to try things like this, was a scarf with reversible cables. So it was the same on the front and the back.
Okay.
Um, and I didn't know that that was like supposed to be a complicated thing or whatever. And it is a complicated thing, I guess. Uh, but it was one of my very first projects, and I still have it somewhere. It's a really ugly shade of pink.
Oh
Um,
gosh.
yeah, that I think I dyed myself with like Kool-Aid or something, um,
Oh,
because I
you
was
dyed the yarn
all
yourself?
yeah, because I was all curious about everything. I still am very curious about everything. It's part of who I am. But yeah, it was pretty hideous. And sometimes I got the cables crossed the wrong way or whatever. But it was a good learning experience. And I loved
Hmm.
how the pattern went from like a 2x2 rib to these like really cool cables. And then if you
Mm,
flipped it over, it was exactly the same. So
that is really cool. I'm all about having reversible projects, especially with things like
yes,
scarves where you will often see the other side of the scarf. So
yes.
I'm big about making sure things are reversible. Cool.
So what are
Anything
you
else?
working on now?
I'm still working on the same damn sweater, the same damn sweater, because what happened is uh, I ordered the yarn for the sweater. I ran out of yarn, so I ordered a second batch of yarn. It was a different dye lot. It was very, very obviously different. And then you gave me the wonderful idea of creating this transition between one color to the next. So I did all of that. And I got up to the turtleneck part of the sweater, ran out of yarn again, ordered more yarn. Turned out the third batch of yarn is the same, it's either the same dye lot or very, very close to the first batch. And I'm just like, God damn it. And so
Oh.
you told me that I should just like keep going and leave it. And then I was like, I can't, it bothers me. So I ripped it all out uh and I'm now doing this part like the third time basically. So that it's all
I'm
the same.
sorry.
It's fine.
That
It's
is
not your
just,
fault. It's just, it's super annoying with
it
I
is.
don't know what's going on with this company and their dyeing practices. Um, if
So
anyone is curious, it's called Drops Baby Merino Unicolor, which is not necessarily unicolor because they have like multiple dye lots and you can get multiple different colors from different. Anyway, that's my
I
fiasco of a sweater.
I have never regretted ripping back a project as far as like after I finished it. But at the same
Yeah,
time, it's so painful. Like you've
it
spent all
is.
that
It
time
is.
working on
Hmm.
something, and now it's like it's just all that work is gone. But
Yeah.
you learn from it, I guess. That's really cheesy, but like I said, I've never regretted it after doing it because, then whatever you end up with is better.
Yeah.
But it's
It's
still hard.
painful.
It's still emotionally like this is
Yeah.
difficult.
I used to never want to rip anything out. And so if it turned out that um I made a mistake or, something wasn't working the way I wanted to, I would just abandon the project rather than rip it
Oh,
out.
yeah, me too.
Um, but
I have a
now
big frog
I've
pond.
so, but now I'm like, you know what? It's okay to rip things out and reknit it because even though it's like redoing the project all over again, at least it's like more knitting that I could do. And I
Yeah.
enjoy the
And
knitting
you don't have to buy more
process.
yarn.
Exactly, exactly. So I've consoled myself um, and to the fact that I'm like, it's okay to rip out large chunks of projects and reknit them because it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
So I tell myself.
So did you finish the socks that you were knitting?
I did not. Those are still ongoing, but that's fine. They're just like ongoing. I like having a pair of socks that are just ongoing. I can take with me if I'm leaving the house and I might have some time to knit somewhere. So yeah, those are just my ongoing socks.
I have
What
a
are you
feeling that
working on? Sorry, go ahead.
oh no, I'm working on my ongoing project. It's the Musselburgh hat by Isolde Teague, and I'm using actually yarn I frogged from a scarf
Mm,
because I had started the scarf many years ago, then like stuck the project in a project bag, and it ended up in my closet in like the bottom of a drawer and was not seen for years.
mm,
So, because it was inside a project bag inside a purse that I hadn't carried in a long time. Because I don't always carry a purse. And when I do, like I'll carry one for a few months and I'll switch out and start carrying another one. So I had my project bag inside a purse that I haven't carried in like 2 or 3 years. And I found the scarf in there while I was cleaning out my closet. And I was like, oh, this is cool. And I was looking at it, and my gauge has changed so much since then. And I looked at
mm,
it and I was like, there's no way I'm going to be able to get that kind of gauge to
mm-hmm,
finish this project. And I could have tried different needles and whatnot, but I decided to just because I also have that same type of scarf. It was a Clapotis. So I also have
mm-hmm,
another one that I just finished in not the same colors, but they're both like very heavy into green. And
mm-hmm.
I was just like, you know what? We'll just rip this out and do something else. So I decided to do this hat because I don't have a lot of hand knit hats and I like wearing hats. Um, and there's enough of it to make a really floppy hat that'll hold my hair up in it, which is
Mm-hmm.
very important to me that the hair goes inside the hat and not like down here because that would bother me. I'm also new to having longer hair. This is pandemic hair. So when I wear a hat, I wear it to cover my head and I want the hair up covered. So this hat pattern is basically a long tube with hat shaping on either end. And then you stuff one end into the other to make a slouchy hat. So it's double thick. And the pattern you can knit in any gauge. It literally, you start with 4 8 stitches or whatever, and then you knit for an inch, doing the increases exactly the same way no matter what your gauge is, and then you measure your gauge and then figure out your total stitch count from there. And so
I like that.
It's a pattern that I think is really flexible, which I like. I don't always like knitting gauge swatches. I don't think anybody really likes knitting gauge swatches.
No.
But if I can pick up a pattern and not swatch, that's why I like scarves and shawls so much, is because gauge really doesn't matter. But especially a hat pattern, because I have so many hats that are too big or too small because I didn't bother swatching. So if I have one that I don't have to swatch, I'm all in. But yeah, so I started, and it's actually got some weird like pooling going on that I'm not sure I like, but maybe I can stick this be the end that goes inside the hat. And it might change. It looks like this yarn is not super regular in the way that it was dyed. So it might, like that big purple stripe might, like, it looks like it might be thinning out into more irregular patterning. But it's going to be my take everywhere project, and knit in front of hi, Ziggy's here.
Hi, Ziggy.
You like to say hello? Let's see if we can. Oh, there he is.
Hi, Ziggy.
Hi, Ziggy.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay. Go lie down.
I'm also not a big fan of swatching. And so this is also why I like scarves and shawls and socks, because you don't really need to swatch. And I have knit hats before but I get the same problem as you, is because I don't swatch, then I get these like really oddly sized hats that are either too big or too small. And it's really, I've never really thought of a head as something that you need to measure for fit, because
Right.
I feel like neck and head is like the same region of the body. And if you don't need to measure for scarves, then you shouldn't need to measure for hats. But clearly I'm wrong. Surprise. So I like that, the idea of a pattern where you don't need to swatch it and you can kind of just adjust the number of stitches to fit whatever sized head you're trying to knit for. So I might look into that pattern actually.
Yeah, it's and it's knit, like I said, it's knit for any gauge. So they have instructions right at the beginning of the pattern for if you're knitting for this size. And I always knit like a child large, adult small size for my head. And because that seems to fit around like the forehead to the nape really well, which is, I guess, the most important measurement there. But then I want like a lot of room back here. Like I want a big slouchy thing. So I like that this pattern lets you have both. And it apparently can double as a scarf too, if you make the tube long enough.
Right. Yeah. But I'm just thinking I can see having like lots of room in the back, but you wouldn't want it super long, would you?
You could roll up the front, I think.
I guess so. Yes, it's true. Because I was like, it's one of those like, like the sleep hats where it's like really, really long and there's like a pom-pom at the end.
A stocking cap.
Yes,
I did a whole bunch of those for my nieces and nephews 2 years ago, I think. The long hats with the did I put a tassel on the end? I think I put tassels on the end. Maybe. But yeah, I knit some of those for Christmas a couple of years ago for the nieces and nephews. Because they look cute on babies and kids.
Yeah, they do.
Not so much on grown-ups.
No, not so much on grown-ups. Do you have a favorite kind of ribbing? If you do, let us know in the comments. And if you have any other knitting topics that you'd like us to talk about, please drop suggestions in the comments as well.
So our writing topic for today is actually chapter length and how we decide on that. Which, Lynn, you're starting a new book now, right? And
I
you're
am.
figuring that stuff out.
Yeah. So this is my starter. And do you prefer shorter lengths or longer chapters? Things like that. What are your thoughts?
So I kind of approach it fairly organically, I think. Um, a chapter for me is usually 2 or 3 scenes,
Mm-hmm.
and however long those scenes need to be. But then I have chapters that I'm like, well, this is one scene and that is a full complete chapter.
Mm,
But it depends for me how many points of view are in the story,
mm-hmm.
and and what's going on in the scenes that are in that chapter. So my book Out of Sync that came out in October is actually has really, really long chapters. I think they're 4,000 or 5,000 words each chapter, which is a lot for me. I mean, for other
Mm-hmm.
people, that's completely normal. And I know there are fanfic writers out there who have 20,000 word chapters, and
Mm,
bless them
mm-hmm.
for their service. For me, that's a whole book. but for me, when I was writing Out of Sync, I originally wrote it literally out of sync. Now the final version is in 2 parts, one part 10 years earlier than the second part. But as I
Mm-hmm.
was writing it, I was mixing and I was switching back and forth between the 2 timelines in each segment.
Mm-hmm.
And so the amount of time I spent in one timeline determined how long that chapter was. So they ended up being a lot longer because you needed to be in that timeline long enough that you didn't feel like it was swapping back and forth really quickly. So I ended
Mm-hmm.
up with these really long 4,000 word chapters,
Mm-hmm.
4 or 5,000 word chapters.
Mm-hmm.
And that suited that story. I could have broken them up more when I broke it out into parts instead of having it swap back and forth.
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't. I left them long because I felt those chapter lengths suited the story and the characters and what was
Mm-hmm.
going on in the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like in most of my books, the chapters are, like I said, 2 or 3 scenes, and each scene is about 1,000 to 1,500 words. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, some of them are shorter, some of them are longer,
Mm-hmm.
um, but then I would get to the chapters that would have the sex scenes in them, and they would be much, much, much
They are
longer.
always so much
um,
longer. It's like,
because, well, there's a lot that has to happen in a scene like that. You have to have the emotional intimacy, you have to have the
mm-hmm.
physical intimacy, you have to have um, literal descriptions of the action,
Mm-hmm.
some more than others, depends on
Mm-hmm.
um, how detailed you want that scene to be. But there's a lot that's going on, and it ends up being a lot of words, and um, a lot of time is spent on um, blocking physical moving through
Mm-hmm.
space,
Yep.
which I think of sex scenes as like action scenes. There's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
physical activity going on that you have to describe, but there's also a lot of emotional development that is happening at the same time, or in my opinion, there should be.
Mm-hmm.
um, Especially in a romance novel, you want something to be happening emotionally along with that physical
Mm-hmm.
intimacy. And so those chapters always end up super long. So
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I end up combining other chapters to make the chapter length more consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I don't bother and I just leave it as it is. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Um, so with going public, the chapters tend to be around 2,000 words, and some of them I think end up toward the 3,000 word um, range. And for some reason, while I was writing it, I got into this rhythm where like every scene needs to be 2,000 words and every chapter needs to be one scene. And I don't know why I thought that. I just like somehow got it into my brain that that was how it's supposed to be. Obviously, not every chapter was just one scene. Um, And now that I'm starting a new project, I'm like, it's okay to have multiple scenes in one chapter, multiple short
Mhm.
scenes in one chapter, if it suits what's going on in the story. So uh, when I think some people tend to write in chapters and they know like in this chapter this happens and in this chapter and this happens. But um, what I used to do is I would write in scenes. So I just have a list of scenes, and once I'm finished, then I break them up into chapters depending on length, depending on, what's happening and things like that. That is not
That's
what
the
I
way I
did.
write too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's not what I did with going public, but now that I'm starting a new project, I'm going back to that so that it's it's just I think it makes more sense in my head. Um, but it was interesting to do it both ways. And I think for future projects, I might also, depending on what it is, I might write in chapters or I might write in scenes. But I have seen some books out there where a chapter is like super, super short, like 200 or 300 words. And
Right.
it
Like it's
was,
just a paragraph.
yeah, it's just a paragraph to like move to like link what's happening before to what's happening next. And I've always wondered, like, is that was there any other way to do that without having to have like a separate chapter of just one paragraph? Um, I don't know.
think it's I think it's a stylistic choice when people do
Hmm.
things like that. Like there's just a um they make that choice that they're going to have this single abrupt chapter in between. And
Hmm.
I think it creates a sort of pause for the readers. Like it's a comma in between chapters or something, like
Uh-huh.
it's this moment of pause and like almost reflection.
Hmm.
At least the books that I've seen do it that way.
Hmm.
um, and it can be very effective, I think. And I
Hmm.
think back to, and I know these books they get a lot of love and they get a lot of hate, but the Twilight books,
Hmm.
there was the one after, and I read them so long ago, but there is the one where edward Edward and Bella, right? Okay, so Edward leaves
Hmm.
Bella, and like there's just chapter chapter and chapter of blank space, like the,
Oh,
because there's she's in mourning for her relationship, she's
huh.
devastated. And I thought that was a very clever way to show depression and grief, like
Hmm.
that the chapters of emptiness.
Hmm.
I thought that was very clever. And I I think there's a lot going on in those books that I don't really want to get into, but that make them not wonderful books. But I think stylistically, there were some very smart choices made. And I thought
Hmm.
that was one of them. And I know other people hated it.
Hmm.
But I thought it was very well done. And I like when authors use their chapters and the format of the book to make a statement like that. And
Hmm.
so,
Yeah, it's true. It is
yeah,
interesting because writing is words, but writing can also be the choice to not use words, right?
right.
And the impact that not using words can have, both in the literal sense, but also in like less obvious ways of like what do you have characters say, what do you actually write down on the page, versus what is implied through um, various events that are happening. So
Right.
yeah, I think that is an interesting. I have not read the Twilight book, so I don't know. Um, but that does sound like a very interesting um, and not something you tend to see in sort of commercial fiction.
Right. Right. And I do feel like maybe young adult fiction is more open to doing things like that, to doing
Hmm.
things where they're playing with the form in
Hmm.
addition to in addition to what the actual words say.
Hmm.
I don't feel like especially commercial romance is very open to things like that.
Mhm.
I know indie romance. I know a lot of indie romance authors do some interesting creative things with their some interesting stylistic things with their writing.
Mhm.
Sierra Simone comes to mind for that. I think she has done some interesting things with her chapter length
Mhm.
uh, and stuff like that. Her Thorn Chapel series is is very, I don't even know how to describe it. It's like it's very, very, very good. But it's very, it does a lot of things with form that I think break what we think of as the norms in romance
Mhm.
writing, which I like. I
Mhm.
like the artistic side of that. I like that people take chances like that, and
Mhm.
Sierra's great at that. So yeah, I really liked that series.
Cool.
That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So what
Um,
what are you working on now?
what am I working on?
Yes, you
Uh,
said you're writing a new book. Is it
oh, yes.
contemporary?
It
Is
is
it
contemporary. I really only ever do contemporary. So I'm doing a royal series. Um, and I'm calling it the Ranner Royals because Ranner is the name of the royal family. And it is set in a fictional island kingdom in Asia. And it's going to be three books that follow the romances of the three siblings in the royal family.
cool?
Yeah, so I'm really excited
I'm
about
excited about
that.
that.
I made the mistake of starting to write it without an outline and then got like 60% through and was like, I don't know what I'm doing. So I had to like go back and re-outline the whole thing and was like, okay, I got to rewrite whole huge chunks of this, which is lesson to myself to always outline before I start writing because I never do well when I try to pants a book.
I'm the same. Well, I'm not a thorough outliner, but I do like my 8 sequence outline. I use
Hmm.
the Script Labs 8 sequence structure and then break out the story into chunks that way. And that leaves me a lot of flexibility to, pants if I want to.
Hmm.
but, but I still have the structure of the story already lined out before I
Hmm.
start. And I find it much easier to write that way rather than just off the top of my head. I'm much more
Yeah.
disciplined that way. I
Yeah.
don't end up with chunks of stuff that I have to throw out later that way.
Yeah. I mean, I've been tracking the word count on this book, and currently, in terms of words that will most likely make it into the final manuscript, it's at like 65-ish, but I've written more than 90,000 words in the book,
Ooh,
a lot of which is not going to make it into the final book. So
it's going to make your Patreon patrons very happy, though.
I suppose so. Although, to be honest, I'm just like, some of this is really, really bad. I don't think I want to show it to anybody, but we'll see
Fair.
when we get there. We'll see.
I I find that I end up adding more in editing than I end up removing.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
not a person who ends up removing a lot of text during edits. But when I do, it's like a paragraph, not a scene. Like I'll rewrite an entire paragraph or rewrite the scene, but leave large chunks of it intact. So I don't
Hmm.
end up with deleted scenes,
Mm, I
which
definitely do. When I edit or when I revise, I'm basically like rewriting entire chapters, sometimes in ways that look absolutely nothing like the first draft. And I don't know why I do that, but I'm starting to accept that it is just a part of my process.
there you go.
It means there's a lot
I
of
think
words that end up on the cutting floor, but I don't know if it works. It works. So,
I think I do the same thing, but I do it as part of the writing process and not as part of the revising process. Like I'll write
mhm.
something and the next day I'll sit down and I'll read it over and I'll be like, well, that sucks. you know, and I'll just delete it and start that scene over or whatever. I'm just not very I'm not very good at leaving what I wrote yesterday alone and moving on. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah,
very
same.
much one of those people who does not move on to the next part until that part is how I want it.
Yes, same.
But then that also leaves me feeling like I need to tinker with everything until the very last minute. And that's maybe not so great either.
Mhm.
So what are you reading right now?
Oh, that's a good question. Okay, hold on. Let me pull this up. I am listening to an audiobook. It's really good. It is A Princess in Theory by Alyssa Cole, which I started because it's like royals. I'm like, oh, I need to like read all the royals so that I can, you know, get a sense of what contemporary royals are like. And it is so hilarious. Not
Yes.
in like lots of jokes kind of way, but the premise is that the prince is pretending to be uh just like a common everyday guy, and his like he's like, I'm so smart, I'm a prince and I have like lots of education and I can do whatever. And then he's like trying to cook or trying to do like simple everyday things that the rest of us are like, that's just stuff that, you know, everybody knows how to do. And he has no idea how to like turn
Yeah.
on a stove. And he's like, oh, what am I doing? And at one point he sets himself on fire. And it's just so funny watching this like,
I love Alyssa's writing too.
yeah,
She's
it's
very
really
good.
good. Yeah, it's very good. It's I'm loving the premise. I'm loving the writing. I'm listening to audiobook and the narrator is very, very good. Um, let me see if I can figure out who the narrator is. Oh, the narrator is Karen Chilton, and she's very good. Um, you know, doing all the different accents and stuff like that. So, yeah, I'm really enjoying it.
Cool.
What are
I
you
am
reading?
I'm still reading. I started it last weekend. Angling for You by Adele Buck. It's not out yet, but I think it will be by the time this episode airs, so we'll have a link to that. But it is about a woman who is a fly fishing guide
Mm,
and a librarian who hires her to teach him how to fly fish, which is something he knew how to do as a child, but abandoned the hobby when as he got older. But then his
mm-hmm,
father has just passed away and left him his fishing rod. So he hires her to teach him how to fly fish again.
mm-hmm,
And I love that. I love books where you have a woman character who is doing something that is a career that is more traditionally
mm,
masculine or more
mm-hmm,
traditionally something that men would do.
mm-hmm,
Um, and there's a lot of good moments in the beginning, especially where, you know, she's talking with other people in her industry, in her fly fishing business, and they don't understand why a woman wouldn't want to go out alone with a bachelor party. You
mm,
know, they're
mm-hmm,
like, they think that would be the best because it's a bachelor party. And she's like, I'm not going out
mm.
alone in a boat with a bunch of men who are getting drunk. What?
Yeah,
No,
that
you know.
sounds like a
And
bad
so
idea.
there's very much a lot of um there's a lot of interrogating why women might not want to do those jobs um, as well. And I think, and of course, you know, there's a librarian, and he's hot, and
Mm-hmm,
he has a cute dog named Honey, and you know, I'm
mm.
a sucker for a book with a dog in it, so that's great. And the cover's really cute too.
And it's nice that the guy is a librarian, which tends to be a traditionally feminine job as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
like it's a little bit of a switch. And he's
Yeah.
actually a librarian at the university where she's getting her degree, which I think is
Oh, okay.
kind of
Nice.
interesting. I haven't really seen how I think about a third of the way in, so I haven't really seen how she's going to um, handle that sort of conflict of interest thing.
Mm.
Um,
Would it be a conflict of interest though? Because
Not
he's
really a
not her
conflict of interest, more like
professor. He's
a,
just
yeah, there's a little bit, I think a little bit of a like a power differential thing there, but I don't feel like he has any power over her as a
okay.
librarian.
Yeah.
But I haven't I haven't seen yet how that's going to be handled. It was something where initially he was like, you can't date a student kind of thing.
Mm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I haven't really gotten far enough to see thing. I haven't had a lot of time for reading, but I am listening to, we talked about Jordan Castillo Price's Nevermind series because I was
Mm-hmm.
reading that
Mm-hmm.
a few weeks ago. Well, now I'm listening to the audio and I'm on the second book, Forget Me Not. And I really love the narrator.
Okay.
I listen while I'm commuting and I don't have a very long commute. So it can take me a while to
Mm-hmm.
listen to a whole book.
Mm-hmm.
But the narrator is so good. And he's, at first, I didn't think I liked him. I thought he was a little over the top. But then the more
Mm-hmm.
I listened, the more I liked him. And then something switched for me between the first and the second book because now I'm like, this is the best narrator I've ever heard. So he really grew on me between the two books.
Uh-huh.
And he is very dramatic in the way that he reads, which I think was a little off-putting for me at first, but
Mm-hmm.
only because it's not necessarily what I'm used to. Um, I'm not used to so much acting in a narrator, but
Mm.
it became really effective, um,
Mm-hmm. Do you
especially
know what
by the
his name
time.
is?
Oh, hold on, let me look. Got my phone right here. Hold on. His name is Seth Clayton, and I don't think I've ever heard him narrate anything else before. Um,
Okay.
and he's not the guy who normally does Jordan's books, so that was interesting too.
Okay.
Um, yeah, Seth Clayton. He's really, really good. And I accidentally started playing that audiobook. Oops. So luckily the volume wasn't on because I don't even know what scene we were in the middle of. Um,
Oops.
but there's only 19 minutes left. I'm going to finish it on my next drive to work, maybe.
Yay.
Um, so yeah, so I'm really enjoying that narrator, and that has been occupying me on my commute. It's one of those books that when I um, when I pull into the parking lot at work, I'm like, I got to go clock in. But I don't want to clock in. I want to sit here and listen to this. So to me, that's a great audiobook if I
Yes.
get to where I'm going and I don't want to stop the car. So
Yes. Agreed. Agreed. Cool.
so we'd love to hear what you're reading right now and what you're writing if you're a writer, and your thoughts on chapter lengths and using chapters stylistically and all that great stuff. So if you would leave those thoughts in the comments below, and also let us know if there's anything you'd like us to talk about writing wise, if there is a topic that you'd like us to consider as far as reading and writing and anything to do with the craft. Please let us know in the comments below.
And if
I just lost my
you
earbud.
if you've enjoyed the discussion today, please like, comment, and subscribe to support our channel. And we'll have the links to all of the books and patterns in the box below. And until next time, remember, write boldly, knit fearlessly.